You have already done this. Maybe once, maybe several times. You walked into a room, lay down on a table, and a stranger put something into your arm or held a mask over your face. You were told to count backward. You got to 8, maybe 7, and then nothing. Not the darkness you see when you close your eyes, not the slow heaviness of falling asleep, not even the brief floating sensation of a dream beginning, just a clean, seamless cut. One moment you were a person lying under fluorescent lights thinking about the number 7. The next moment, someone was saying your name, and it was hours later, and the thing they came in to do to your body had already been done. Here is what makes that strange. During those hours, surgeons opened you, moved things around inside you, occasionally removed parts of you. The anesthesiologist watched numbers on a screen that represented the electrical activity of your brain. Nurses talked to each other across your open body. Music may have been playing. The room had a smell. Time was passing, real, measurable, documented time, and none of it reached you. Not because you were deeply asleep and missed it, because something happened to you during those hours that modern neuroscience, with all of its imaging technology and decades of research, still cannot fully explain. The question sounds simple: where did you go? The answer is what nobody tells you before they put you under. Start with what most people believe, because the belief is wrong in a way that matters. The word anesthesiologists use right before they administer the drugs is sleep. They tell you to go to sleep. This is a kindness, a softer way of describing what is actually about to happen than the accurate version, which would be considerably worse for pre-surgery anxiety. But it plants an idea that shapes how most people think about general anesthesia for the rest of their lives. Anesthesia is not sleep. On a brain scan, the difference is immediate and dramatic. During natural sleep, your brain is extraordinarily busy. It cycles through distinct stages: light sleep, deep sleep, REM, each with its own electrical signature. It processes the day's memories. It runs dream sequences. It remains responsive enough to outside stimuli that a loud noise can pull you toward waking. Your sleeping brain is a working brain. It is doing things. Under general anesthesia, that entire picture changes. The cycling stops. The responsiveness stops. The brain drops into a suppressed state and largely holds there until the drugs wear off. Researchers using EEG monitoring during surgery have found something more specific than simple shutdown. Anesthetic drugs appear to disrupt what neuroscientists call functional connectivity, the brain's ability to coordinate information between its different regions simultaneously. What this means in plain terms is that your brain does not necessarily go quiet everywhere at once. Individual regions may still technically be generating electrical activity, but they stop talking to each other in any meaningful way. They become isolated islands. And this matters enormously because of what those connections are apparently responsible for. There is a theory of consciousness developed by mathematician and neuroscientist Giulio Tononi called integrated information theory. The core argument is that consciousness is not located in any single region of the brain. It is not a thing sitting somewhere waiting to be switched on or off. It is what emerges when the brain successfully integrates enormous amounts of information across different regions simultaneously into one unified, coherent experience. You are not conscious in your visual cortex. You are not conscious in your frontal lobe. You are conscious in the integration, in the coordination between all of them happening at once, producing one experience out of countless separate signals. Anesthesia, according to this framework, does not turn off consciousness the way you turn off a light. It dismantles the specific process that consciousness is made of. The individual components may still be running. The connections between them simply stop producing anything unified, anything that could be called you experiencing something. It is less like turning off a house's electricity and more like cutting every wire connecting the rooms to each other. Power might still technically be flowing somewhere in the walls, but the house cannot function as a coordinated whole. Nothing in it can talk to anything else. And in that gap between the connections going down and coming back up, there is no one home. Now here is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. If consciousness is integration, if you are the coordination rather than the components, then what general anesthesia does is not pause you. It does not put you in storage. It does not send you somewhere quiet to wait. It temporarily stops assembling you. The you that counts backward from 10 is a specific pattern of coordination across billions of neurons. That pattern requires constant maintenance. It requires the thalamus, a small but critical relay structure deep in the brain to continuously route sensory information upward to the cortex, where it gets woven into the unified stream of experience you move through every waking moment. General anesthetics appear to specifically target thalamic activity. They interrupt the relay. The cortex may still technically be capable of processing, but it has been cut off from the steady stream of incoming information it uses to build conscious experience out of. The puzzle pieces are still on the table. They have simply been scattered. And a scattered puzzle is not a picture. It is not a picture that is resting or waiting or hiding. It is just pieces. And the person who was assembled from those pieces, the one who counted to 7, is not anywhere during that time. Not sleeping, not dreaming, not experiencing a quiet darkness. Simply not currently assembled. When the drugs wear off and the thalamus comes back online and the regions begin coordinating again, the pattern reconstructs. The picture reassembles. You come back. But here is the question that researchers cannot yet answer with certainty. Is that the same you? Or is it a reconstruction that is continuous with you in every measurable physical sense, but genuinely discontinuous in terms of conscious experience? Is there a thread connecting the person who said 7 to the person who woke up? Or is the continuity something the reconstructed brain simply assumes because it has access to the same memories? Philosophers have been arguing about this for decades. Neuroscientists are beginning to have the tools to make the argument more precise. Nobody has settled it. There is a phenomenon that makes all of this considerably more unsettling than a purely philosophical exercise: anesthesia awareness. It occurs in roughly 1 to 2 cases per 1,000 surgeries, which sounds rare until you consider how many surgeries happen every day globally, which makes it considerably less rare than you would prefer. In documented cases, patients retain some level of awareness during a procedure despite anesthesia being correctly administered. Most report fragments only, sounds from the operating room, a vague sense of pressure, brief disconnected flickers of something. In rarer cases, patients have reported being able to feel pain during surgery while being completely unable to move or signal that fact to anyone in the room. This happens because anesthesia is not one switch. It is several switches being managed simultaneously. One drug suppresses consciousness, another suppresses pain, a third, a paralytic, keeps the body still during the procedure. If the dosing of any one component is slightly off, you can end up with the paralytic working correctly while the consciousness suppression is incomplete. The body is still, the person inside it is not. What makes this relevant to the larger question is what it reveals about the architecture of what we casually call going under. Unconsciousness and the inability to move are separate biological processes that anesthesia typically produces together but can, under certain conditions, produce independently. Which means the gap you experience as seamless from the inside is being maintained by multiple independent systems that each require precise calibration to hold. And then there is what happens when you count backward and the drugs first take effect. EEG monitoring during this transition has found that right before full unconsciousness sets in, the brain often goes through a brief burst of chaotic electrical activity, something researchers have described as a kind of storm before the quiet. Some patients report vivid, dreamlike imagery at the edges of consciousness as they go under or come back out, fragments of something assembled right at the moment the integration process is rapidly collapsing or beginning to rebuild. These are the moments when the puzzle is mid-scatter, pieces still moving, not yet gone, not yet whole. The experience of waking up turns out to be just as strange as going under, and in some ways, stranger. Coming out of general anesthesia is not an instant return. Different brain functions come back online at different speeds. Basic reflexes return relatively quickly. Higher cognitive functions, clear thinking, coherent memory formation, accurate judgment can lag behind by hours. This is why patients immediately after surgery sometimes say things they will not remember, ask the same question repeatedly, express dramatic emotions about completely mundane situations. The parts of the brain responsible for filtering, coherence, and forming accurate memories are among the last to fully come back online. The reconstruction is not instantaneous. It is not clean. It is a brain rebooting its own most complex systems in sequence, starting from the bottom and working up, with the most sophisticated processes, the ones most responsible for the experience of being a thinking, self-aware person, arriving last. And yet from the inside, none of this is felt. There is no sense of gradual reassembly, no awareness of the reconstruction happening. You count to 7. Then someone is saying your name. The gap between those two moments has no texture, no duration, no felt absence. Because the very mechanism that dismantled your conscious experience during anesthesia is the same mechanism that prevents you from forming any memory of that dismantling happening. The amnesia is not incidental. It is engineered into how the drugs work, a deliberate feature, not a side effect. Even in cases of partial awareness, the amnesic properties of certain anesthetic compounds mean many patients who do experience something during surgery wake up with no memory of it at all, which is simultaneously the most practical thing about anesthesia and the most philosophically strange thing about it. The gap is not just seamless because nothing happened. The gap is seamless because the system responsible for recording what happened was specifically disabled before anything started. So where do you go during general anesthesia? The honest answer, based on everything current neuroscience has established, is that you probably do not go anywhere. Your brain does not transport your consciousness somewhere else to wait. It does not store you in some protected background process running silently beneath the surgery. The unified continuous experience of being you, which turns out to require constant active maintenance by specific neural networks working in coordination, simply stops being produced. The thalamus stops relaying. The regions stop integrating. The pattern that constitutes your experience ceases to be generated. You do not experience darkness during that time, because experiencing darkness would itself require a working experiencer. You do not experience the passage of time, because tracking time requires the same integration that has been interrupted. You do not exist, in any experiential sense, during those hours, which is a sentence that sounds dramatic until you consider that the alternative framing, that you were somehow present but unable to perceive anything, requires explaining where exactly that presence was located and what it consisted of, which current science cannot do. A puzzle scattered across a table is not a picture waiting to come back. It is not resting or hiding or suspended. It is just pieces. And when the anesthesiologist carefully, skillfully, reliably brings those pieces back together in the right order, which they do, successfully, millions of times every year, the picture that reassembles looks at the nurse shaking its shoulder and feels, with complete subjective certainty, that absolutely nothing happened. That feeling of nothing is the strangest thing about this entire story. Not because nothing happened, but because the process that would have recorded something happening was the first thing to go and the last thing to come back. Every time you have been under general anesthesia, modern medicine successfully and temporarily stopped assembling you, and then put you back together, and you woke up feeling continuous, feeling whole, feeling like the same person who counted backward from 10. Whether that feeling is accurate is a question neuroscience is still working on. The fact that you cannot tell the difference either way might be the most remarkable thing about the entire procedure.